Hello and welcome to another lecture, this time with Kristina Hinz. I'm Josef Mühlbauer, I'm a scientific researcher at Empowerment for Peace, a small peace research institute based in Graz, Austria. Today I have the privilege to introduce you to Kristina Hinz. Kristina is a researcher, political analyst, and writer specialized in public security, law enforcement, violence, and organized crime. In her work, she treats gender as a starting and ending point of analysis. She is currently a researcher at the Laboratory for Violence Analysis at the State University of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and is writing her PhD dissertation entitled Women and the War on Drugs at the Institute for Latin American Studies at the Free University of Berlin in Germany. She is the author of many studies and analyses, and she writes regularly for Open Democracy, most notably in the context of her column Women in Dark Times, Feminist Perspectives on Security, Violence and Organized Crimes. She also served as a consultant for many years for international development agencies, through the German Agency for International Cooperation, GIZ in German. She advised the Brazilian Amazon Fund, the world's largest climate fund, on gender, rights of indigenous people, environmental safeguards, participatory mechanisms, and multi-stakeholder governance, among other topics. Dear Kristina, I thank you very much that you followed my invitation for this talk and lecture. And now I give the floor to you. Tell us about your research findings.
Okay. Well, Joseph, thank you first and foremost for the invitation. I'm super happy to joining this initiative, which I find very important. Through a little bit of insight about my work, about what I have been researching throughout the last years in the context of my PhD research, but also other studies that I have been carrying out, sort of together with the colleagues here of my laboratory in Brazil, and also with other colleagues. Today, I will try to make a little bit of a bigger round, which will take us from a discussion about freedom of speech, which I think is a very important topic currently, not only in Brazil, but also in other countries, also Germany and Austria, unfortunately, the US. And from this discussion, I will try. I hope I will succeed, and I hope I will be didactic at some point or other to talk about penalization practices in Brazil, in militarization and drug policy. So this seems a little bit weird at the first glimpse, maybe, but I think it's also clear as for us, I have this background in human rights and public security, that is super important to be actually able to denounce things, right? To be actually able to do our work and document difficult and hard to swallow topics such as police violence, which I have done, so I'm still doing, such as dynamics of organized crimes and other uncomfortable topics. However, and this is a little bit tricky topic, the sort of urgent topic currently in Brazil is the ban on the social network X, formerly known as Twitter, which has been in place for about a month. And it's weirdly enough not something that people really in Brazil, that people don't really like to talk about much, or actually many people actually also from progressive spectrum, they actually endorse this decision, which I think from an outlook is a little bit weird. Obviously, many people around the world have done this sort of like a criticism of Elon Musk buying Twitter and turning it into X. Many people have sort of left the platform. So this is a little bit of tricky, murky waters to begin the discussion, because I think it's very controversial, and it's a little bit weird to make this sort of defense now, but this ban is wrong for many reasons. There might be other better platforms, obviously. And if we talk about this, or if I talk about this, doesn't mean that I defend Elon Musk as some sort of, I don't know, all around way or something like this. So the situation in Brazil is a little bit multifaceted and very controversial, a little bit tricky. So I try to be didactic by making my point here. So as I said, the network is banned for about a month after a Supreme Court decision, actually. So what had happened here in Brazil, and this turns the whole discussion a very tricky topic to engage with, is that the Brazilian Supreme Court actually mandated acts to shut down the accounts of certain people who have been associated to the Brazilian right. And then Elon Musk refused to do that. And then, the Brazil office was fined. And they sort of left the country, or other people said, yeah, they were sort of kicked out. So it's a little bit debatable, what exactly happened. The point of engagement that I want to talk about is actually the matter of the fact that currently ex-users are fined with 50,000 reais per day if they access the social network. This is about, I don't know, 8,000 euros, about $10,000. So this is a lot of money, especially for Brazilians. And I think the first point to make is actually, there is a distinction to be made between, let's say the company or the owner of the company and, private individuals, many of them, journalists, activists, academics, who, use this network because, this is what they have at hand, and this is the sort of communities they constructed and they don't want to lose for their work, for engaging with other people around the world, for denouncing human rights violations. This is particularly tricky because we have elections, like in Brazil, there are elections this month, municipal elections. So obviously it's very important for, media workers, for, academics, or anyone actually who wants to have a political opinion, that, that these networks are open, and that one should not be facing tremendous fines that exceeds the most yearly salaries of most Brazilians, actually. This is like the first point to be made here. And like, this topic is not very much discussed in Brazil, and I find this a little bit weird. The reason, I think, is that this heavy fining or the heavy penalties that the same Supreme Court judge had applied previously to other, activists from far-right spectrum, which I don't defend, but many of them have actually been jailed without, having seen a trial and stuff like this after the attempted coup in Brazil at the beginning of January 2023. So it is towards the whole discussion like very, very tricky, because does one defend these people? No, one does not really. However, one sees clearly that there has been this infringement of basic rights, basic legal principles, like such as the principle of a legitimate defense, or such as like this very excessive, or one might say abusive, penalization of fining of users or Twitter ex-members, right? So this is all a little bit excessive and a little bit weird. Why does this happen currently? And I think it's very important to put this in a little bit of context and to, like, be a little bit understandable, while at the same time sort of maintaining at least I maintain my position, this ban is wrong. This is excessive to find private users with such a huge amount of money for, accessing social networks, which they might even use for their work, Thing is that, as obviously that, Brazil was under a far-right government for years under Bolsonaro, from a military captain. And during these years, obviously, the left, or in a broader way, like social movements, women's movements, environmental movements, etc., had a very hard time. So at that point in time, actually, it didn't start with Bolsonaro, it started with Michel Temer. But at this point of time, we were getting the hits. So, like the framing of the enemy at that point in time, where, like the so-called communists, or the so-called socialists, or the so-called feminists, or the LGBT, so this community, the Black community, so they were under heavy fire from the government, actually not only from the government, also from many government supporters. And this was a very difficult time where many known, Brazilian politicians actually left the country. Many known academics left the country because they were actually really scared of the far right in Brazil, and rightfully so. The city councilor Janeiro from Janeiro, she was murdered by paramilitary forces. So this was really heavy, and actually really heavy on everybody. As I said, I also work in public security, human rights. So this whole community was even more under fire than they normally are. And then, in 2022, Lula got elected, and people were actually really scared at that point in time that there would be there would be a coup, that somehow military, or like military police or something, wouldn't really go with this election. And it's also, at the beginning of January, it did happen that they tried to take some of the institutions in Brasilia. And there was a dangerous moment, that the far left didn't really wanted to allow to lose power, right? And this attempted coup was obviously investigated, and rightfully investigated afterwards, and led to the persecution of many of these people, right? So this is like a little bit of the beginning of this problematic moment where we are right now, that maybe too many exceptions have been generated along the way, right? Or have been sort of normalized, because, and this is actually what I want to talk about this sort of fear, which is very understandable and very real, of the far right, right? And then we're finding ourselves right now in a moment where people accept censorship and the banning of social network because they're scared, and this is understandable. But it should open a discussion, how can we actually handle this whole situation a little bit better, and how can we actually, deal with denunciations, with human rights violations, and how can we deal with people from other political spectra. It is interesting in this whole discussion, because what the point that I'm defending is, from the standpoint of public security, we have like some sort of well-known theorem that it's pendulum. It's pendulum, and the pendulum, it swings. So if one accepts some sort of exception, or one accepts some sort of like cutback of rights, under a certain government of a certain political orientation. Then one creates a precedent that in the next government with a different political orientation might be used against someone. So if we allow, like, okay, here we allow like a ban on a social network, because, you know, of these far-right activists, you know, like tomorrow, you know, the same argument might be used against myself, right? And this is a well-known argument in public security studies in Brazil, and it actually derives from the fact, or from the many studies that we have here on the war on drugs, or the war on so-called, you know, on crime, which relates to this same, you know, like very diffuse feeling of fear, which is real. It's something very real for many people who live in cities such as in Rio de Janeiro, and it's something that is across, one might say, all political spectrums and all political classes. And this explains a little bit better why people sort of allow this very excessive handling of certain people or certain situations, you know, like $8,000 for one day in Twitter or something like this. So it's a little bit, as I said, it's a little bit difficult to do this big round, but I will try. Because, you know, like in Brazil, as I said, before this, you know, sort of politically based penalizations, very penalizations, which we saw, you know, under Bolsonaro, which we are sort of seeing right now as well, but against a different specter. You know, there it was against the left-wing people that were heavily politically persecuted, that were really scared of the whole situation. And now one can see the same phenomenon on the far right, which is not very comfortable, you know, to say, because I'm not a person that somehow identifies with their positions. But you know, one can see this movement. In public security, we can clearly say that this diffused fear of the other and of criminals has, you know, produced other very perverse exceptions in the defense of law and the defense of human rights. And another not very nice thing to say about Brazil is that actually the Brazilian democratic period has produced more inmates and more, you know, people killed by state forces, by police forces, than a military dictatorship. And this is due to this fear of the poor. This is due to the fear of the so-called criminals, the fear of you know, people living in favelas, living in shanty towns, which form part of the city, and where this diffuse fear of this other person has produced a situation where one accepts both left and right wing forces, especially the middle class. You know, these heavy police operations and this population in the Brazilian prisons, which is one of the largest in the world. So I can go like a little bit more in detail on this. So actually, since the 1990s, Brazil ranks among the countries with the highest incidence of police violence. And, you know, I had already said that, but I have the number here. So while the military junta executed around 6,000 individuals between 1964 and 1985, in the democratic period between 1998 and 2020, that is already more than 10 years into the democratic period, and only in the state of Rio de Janeiro, police killed more than 20,000 people. And this period also comprises, you know, like the administration of the Workers' Party, which was in power under Lula from 2003 to 2011, and then from there on until 2016 with Josef until she got unrightfully destituted. And this is show the graph here. Second. Now this is Rio de Janeiro. So this is here years and then thousands. So this is not entire Brazil, right? It's just the state of Rio de Janeiro, which is one of the most violent ones. But here one sees clearly, yeah, this development. There has been a drop here. There was during a period when they tried to establish some sort of police reform, which was also not well succeeded, because it's also very militarized, and they were heavily relying on special operation forces who were very brutal. And one can see even at the lowest point of like annual police killings in the state of Rio de Janeiro, you still have like 400 per year. So and then obviously after a certain period in time, these numbers increased tremendously again. And this is, I have argued this in other papers. This is because, this police reform heavily relied on these special troops, special operation troops, who were like put in the communities to combat organized crime, to sort of, get them out of the community. And this produced tremendous human rights violations. People are really scared of these special operations troops. Many of them, they invade houses. They, every community knows, the phenomenon of stray bullets. Children oftentimes, they can't go to school because, there's a shootout somewhere in their community. Women suffer from all sorts of, violations from the part of, these police forces, from sexual harassment to, home invasions, all sorts of theft. Sometimes they steal things. So, it's very heavy. And I have argued somewhere, like that the police violence hasn't really improved. Because, this paradigm of war and this paradigm of, seeing this population as criminal, like seeing this population, which is in these poor neighborhoods, as somewhat associated or, coexisting with their consent, with organized crime groups. So, like this economy of fear and this fear of the other is not only, this drug trafficker, is a heavily armed, masculine, black figure, but it's extended to the entire community. And then, like people are so scared, and they are so scared of drug traffic, and of this, sort of like enemy within, that throughout many, many years, even during Brazilian democracy, these sorts of, horrendous numbers on police killings were accepted. Sort of, yeah, but one must do something. And this is a very difficult pill also to swallow, that societies always sort of produce this sort of other figure where their fears are projected onto, and which sort of open up these spaces for having these tremendous human rights violations. Most of the people who are actually killed by police are men. This is interesting from two standpoints. The first standpoint is, that this enemy figure obviously is a man, because, people are not so scared of women, also due to many social stigma. So, like this figure of the heavily armed black drug trafficker who controls his own territory, and, who extends protection through, his own power, sort of ingrained into this whole idea of public security. And then, like, how did they react? They would send in their own police, militarized police, with a war mentality. So, you know, we have to combat them. We have to neutralize them. And these are discourses which were used by public figures here in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. So, you know, this exception was accepted, you know, or, you know, like some major figures in public security in Rio de Janeiro, they would even say, you know, no, this is a bandido, you know, this is a criminal. It's like an enemy, you know, it's like some sort of subhuman. So this is why we can, you know, yeah, well, these people are killed, you know, and public figures, politicians, they would say that. So this is only to give us a context that there's like a long history of generating like some sort of like excluded population, where these exceptions, even killing, is allowed, or sometimes even considered, you know, like a necessary means of protection. And this is something very, very difficult to say and very difficult to swallow. But one sees it clearly in this in these exceptional numbers. And you know, the other very difficult phenomenon that derived from this diffused fear of the poor, of the other, of, you know, of the Black population, because most people who live in these neighborhoods, they're actually, you know, not white. The other diffused, the other. I mean, there are many consequences of this othering process, but, you know, one of the theories is also that one has not only accepted, you know, like police violence and police killings, one has actually also accepted or even desired the control of entire neighborhoods here through by paramilitary or para-police forces. So they're called militia in Rio de Janeiro, and they're very similar to yeah, what one understands, such as the Italian mafia. So here in Brazil, or in Rio de Janeiro, many of them are like retired cops or retired military or something like this. Some people in the corporation, they still sort of perceive them as part of the corporation, and they started to sort of act as some sort of like community self-defense forces. So people were so scared of crime, of favela, of the poor, that they wanted to have like this sort of like own protection. Yeah, I know someone, some retired cop, something like this. And then these people start like charging protection money, and then they start, you know, like really controlling the neighborhood. And if you don't want to pay the protection money, then, you know, like you made pay, like you're extorted. And then they started to control other infrastructural branches, such as, you know, like TV or like some sort of transportation. So, and, you know, this was accepted or even desired by many, especially Bolsonaro voters. They're quite big on liking these sorts of developments now, but we're safer. So this is very difficult to understand, and it's also you know, from a personal standpoint, also always some sort of weird dance, you know, like where, you know, in one's personal choices, you know, where does one like sort of draw the line? You know, because it involves many personal choices, you know, like how do you want to live, or how far do you let this sort of fear of the other, the fear of the criminal, divert yourself from executing your personal rights. So, you know, many people here, most people here in the middle class, they live in houses where you have doormen, where, you know, like the entry and exit of people is controlled, where you have many cameras, where you have many means of, you know, registering, documenting, like who's there, who's in, who's out, who is this person, what's your name, what's your ID, da, da, da. And then you have like these sorts of people who are like, yeah, you know what, I don't really want to have cameras at home, and I don't really want to have this because, you know, this sort of gets me into this, you know, there's a boundary here and I don't want to get into this private security stuff because we don't like that, right? But it involves many difficult choices, you know, and how can one protect oneself in a city which is violent, but where is one, like, you know, like engaging in this sort of completely exaggerated paranoia, which contributes to the militarization of the city, the expansion of you know, this militia, the expansion of their power, and ultimately, you know, of the social exclusion of the poor, of the Black, and you know, the permissibility of society to sort of accept the heavy violence applied against them. You know, this somehow, you know, brings me back to, you know, like the initial question. I mean, I could still do a little bit of an excursus about prison system or something like this, where also Brazil has one of the highest rates of incarceration in the world. The same population that is now hit harshest by police violence is also the population in the Brazilian prisons. Most of them are also, you know, imprisoned because some charges related to drug trafficking. 1/3 of the current inmates, they also haven't seen a trial. And most of the charges, you know, related to drug trafficking, you know, like if there was a white person, you know, the person wouldn't even, you know, be taken to the police station. So there's also like this difference, you know, like if white person is like caught with, you know, some minor amount of illegal drugs, yeah, nothing happens, right? And, you know, like for other populations, you know, it gets them into jail, then they're there without a trial. And as a matter of fact, also prisons are like some sort of like the recruitment territory for criminal groups. So once you're in, then you're really screwed. You know, so one is in this situation, and happily, you know, in Brazil, there is a very big and a very, like, you know, vivid human rights community. Many people working on these issues for many, many decades. And something like, I think, which is different to Europe, which is different to Austria, which is different to many, many places in the world, you know, like there is actually like this big tradition of like denouncing, documenting and denouncing state violence. You know, like this community obviously lives, you know, from spaces where these denounces can be made. And this is where, you know, social media again is very important. And it's you know, again, it's a little bit difficult to you know, to sort of establish this connection between you know, like a human rights work, and then you have like this Twitter ban, but actually it's not, if actually looks just at the result and not so much at the moment, like who is going to jail at the moment, because this is a dynamic and which can shift. But you know, in order to somehow change this dynamic here, where we have you know, these heavy problems in society, and you know, where like there is this political persecution is actually just the top of the iceberg. So, you know, the war on drugs and these highest rates on incarceration is actually the real issue here, which is so normalized that people don't really talk about it. You know, how can one actually, you know, do something different? And my approach is, you know, to defend, you know, my right and everybody's rights to denounce and to document and to confront authorities. And Twitter or X is an important place to do that. It's not so much used actually in Brazilian activism, I would say. It's more something like what the journalists use, or no, in the human rights community, it's also used, but still, you know, it's one space, and it's better to have one space more than one space left, maybe, would be my argument. And also you have like these advantages that you can share quickly information, and then you can like connect yourself with other researchers or activists around the world, which is very important. So you can like engage with other communities, or you can, you know, like make a connection, you know, between like, let's say Brazil, Palestine or something like that, or even Brazil, like Austria, Germany. I think, but this is my personal opinion, you know, in order to somehow shift this dynamic here and, you know, shift the dynamic in public security, and, you know, like getting sort of, I don't want to say better results, but, you know, like ending these very perverse and very grave human rights violations that we have on a daily basis. You know, one must somehow have the personal consciousness and also the discipline to interrupt oneself when one gets too much into this fear-based attitude. And one must try to think very like objectively and very clearly. Okay, so no, okay, what do they want to do now? Ah, no, they want to ban social network. Is that good? No, that's not good. Ah, okay, so now this left-wing politician, he wants to do what? Ah, he wants to sort of use intelligence technology for the combat of crime. Is that good? No, that's not good, because the right, they have also done that before, was also not good. So, and you know, one needs to be a little bit like very I don't want to say objective, but you know, one needs to somehow take the emotions out of this debate. And it's like, okay, now has this intelligence technology got us anywhere in the past? Not really. You know, it has this fear-based attitude and this like heavier investment in security, or you know, trying to what can we do in our street here? Ah, no, we're scared. Ah, okay, let's just we know someone. Ah, let's just get a private. Let's just hire someone out, and it has been the beginning of the end. So you know, so then one needs to be very objective in these situations and somehow trying to, you know, take these emotions out, which is very difficult because it's not irrational to be scared. But you know, one must try to be somehow stick to the principle, you know. And yeah, the other thing that is so important is to have these spaces, you know, in academia, in journalism, in human rights work, on social networks, to be able to denounce when one has to, right? And yeah, also to, you know, make the universal and unconditional defense of human rights, you know, the start of any point of any sorts of discussion, which obviously means that one needs to look at the militarization of police, for instance. If one looks at this from a standpoint of human rights and not from a standpoint of, you know, like, we need to protect ourselves here. We are all scared. We need to protect ourselves against the enemies, this sort of stuff. But, you know, like, how can one actually protect the human dignity of everyone? And first and foremost, you know, of the local population of each community. And if one then reshift this and this focus on like the defense of human dignity, human rights, right of women and children, and you know, not only of you know, a certain population, but first and foremost of the population, you know, in the community. You know, then this whole approach gets inverse, because then one perceives, okay, it's actually like the current practices of police, is it actually contributing to human rights? Not really. So if one looks at prisons, what's actually the problem here? Like the incarcerated people or the incarcerated practices. So this is a difficult conversation to have, but a very necessary one. And again, we can only have this conversation if we're able to have this conversation. And then it's because in Brazil we're actually able to do this. So we're actually able to document police violence. There are researchers who actually do work in prisons and also document these horrendous conditions. In the communities, you have many, like community journalists, you have many, activists who are doing this on a daily basis. So they are more radical in what they put out to the world, and the sort of denouncements they are doing and that they're able to do. And therefore it's important to maintain this, to have this discussion, and not just to maintain also, my opinion, all spaces where we can have this discussion, and also where we can also, have an international connection or something like this. Yes, that would be my my first contribution, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Kristina.
Thanks again.
I learned a lot, and thank you for your thoughts and analysis. So let me sum up. Even as a lefty, you should be for the freedom of expression and against the ban. And why should we fight for this? Because it's not only a basic right, because it's a space where we can show police violence and many other stuff. So and I believe Noam Chomsky stated, I believe 10 or 20 years ago, that it sets a precedent for the state to go deeper and deeper and to go further and further, and so we shouldn't allow this. And here in Austria we have the discussion about the Bundestrojaner. It's a tool where the state can enter and see, watch all, and document and save all your photos and text messages and so on and so forth. So the state want to enter the private space of one's a social media account. So in Austria 2019, I believe, it was rejected, and the court said it was against the Austrian constitution. So lucky for us in Austria, this didn't happen. But so this was that I wanted to mention about this.
I think also in Germany, I'm not so familiar actually with German politics, but in Germany there are also politicians, I think from the Green Party, who have sort of defended or have denounced, let's say, the spread of, disinformation on Twitter and sort of stuff, which again might be a reasonable denouncement to make. It might be rightful. However, again, it might be harmful if one allows, these automated tools to sort of limit and sort of police these spaces. And this is not a position I had years ago. But I would say, currently one needs to be very careful, that this combat of disinformation is not used as a, censorship tool. And that also, like these sort of fact-checking bots and these technologies are obviously a double-edged sword, because some informations, they can be debated, they can be challenged. If you look, for instance, at at Palestine, in the end of the day, then you have these grave human rights violations, and then no one can say actually who exactly threw the bomb, and then you want to leave it to like bot or something, like they say, okay, then just let the public decide, let the images circulate, and then they can see for themselves. So, yeah, this is yeah, it can be misused, and I'm not sure how one can actually, like tackle these issues. Currently, I would say, like, yeah, people, they might actually be old enough to decide for themselves if they want to believe certain things or not. So maybe, I don't know, maybe instead of, like shutting down accounts or banning, I mean, this is an extreme step. But I don't know, one might actually, yeah, maybe label, or actually also just have the debate or not. If there's also something that you don't want to believe or that you don't want to follow or whatever, you don't have to join the network, or you don't have to follow this person. So just
Yeah,
walk.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And talking about freedom of expression and freedom of speech, yesterday Julian Assange, one of the greatest journalists of all time, maybe, spoke at the Council of Europe, and yeah, he talked about his personal experience, and in this hearing, he talked about his detention and also about the motivation, why he did what he did, and so on and so forth. And it was a touching, yeah, hearing, and I fully recommend it. Yeah, he's one of my greatest heroes. So yeah, a big shout out to Julian. Who is now free, but yeah, we all know the story. Let's move to the next point. Let me sum
Can I
up.
just say something?
Sure. Sorry.
No, because it's a very good point that you made. Actually, I wanted to include this, but then I forgot, because yeah, I think obviously I'm also super happy that that he is out of jail, that he is well. But this is actually, yeah, I think his story, or what his unrightful imprisonment, is actually one of these great examples, where you clearly see this connection, about between, which I somehow try to establish, between doing this heavy work of documenting I mean, in what he did, like dealing with, like foreign policy, you say you're like documenting war crimes. You wouldn't use that word in Brazil, but we would say you document human rights abuses, because it's not for an army or something who commits these things. But it's not so different. To establish this parallel, and like if someone does this sort of like very difficult work regarding like abuses of Western democracies or something, was very shameful that, like, what happened to him, and that he paid with so many years of his life for documenting and speaking the truth, and I was super happy that it's out.
Absolutely, yes. And let me sum up the second part, that you were talking about war on drugs. And with the war on drugs, the police killings increased. So law enforcement and violence is somehow accepted. And I got a paper from the United Nations on the Office of Drugs and Crime, and it's a little bit an old paper, but there I find it interesting that the majority of the population in 2000, yeah, during the election period of June to October 2002, so it's a while ago. The issue of public security was highlighted as the number one concern of the people of Brazil. So that was basically what you were referring to. Yeah, so I was asking myself, what is the root cause for crimes in Brazil? And maybe it's the fact that around millions of people are living with less than $2 per day. We can see the statistics, and there is a marginalized youth, mainly in urban areas, with little hope, no jobs, and so on and so forth. And yeah, maybe we can we can go a little bit and elaborate and analyze the root causes of crime and why is it important also to talk about the economic situation in Brazil.
Okay. So if you want to go into this, I think actually we need actually to go back even further. So the root cause may actually be colonial period slavery. So this segregation of the cities, segregation that you perceive clearly between affluent neighborhoods, which are mostly white, and the people living in the favela. Sometimes people, they throw around this word like apartheid, but it's not really, it doesn't really fit. But if you go to Rio de Janeiro, you clearly perceive this, that there is this the words we use here is like difference between like the favela and the asphalt. Asphalt is like the normal neighborhoods, where people have like an address and where everything is like organized nicely, and cameras everywhere, and this sort of stuff. And then you have like the working population, I mean working in low paid service jobs most of the time, who live in the favela and have to that they work for the others, so they work as doormans, they work as maids, they work, I don't know, in restaurants and service. And in Rio de Janeiro, it's particularly perverse, maybe, because every, let's say, middle class neighborhood has a favela close by, because these people are needed for working, for carrying out these low paid jobs with not much job or social security. I mean, for instance, like with the maids, situation improved a bit with the introduction of some, new labor laws for these women. Because, like, for instance, these jobs, and as you see clearly, that is a legacy from slavery. That you get some like Black women to sort of live with you in your house, and then she takes care of the whole house, and she cooks for you, and she does the laundry, and she does the ironing, and then she takes care of the children. And before the introduction of these like very basic labor laws for these women, they I don't know, they maybe had one afternoon in a week where they could sort of take care of their own families if if the patron, if the boss was nice, and then in these circumstances, you have obviously all sorts of like moral harassment, sexual harassment, all this stuff that no one speaks about, no one documents, no one sues these people, but it's very real. So like the root causes of crime, I mean, you have history, right? You have this obviously you have this large class divisions, and you don't have many but it's like this other side of the same argument, of the same coin. You don't have many opportunities so for these people to actually climb up the social ladder, because public schools are chronically underfunded. Most of them are not, like teachers, they don't get well paid, overcrowded, etc. So like people who can afford it, they send their children to private schools. For many, it's also some sort of like class status issue. No, my child will not interact with these poor children, something like this. And it starts early, when people actually like don't even like to mix their children in the kindergarten. Well, I would say, yeah, but why don't you send your kids to like the public kindergarten, which would be for free, instead of paying all this money? Yeah. So this social
So racism
segregation
is also a big part of it.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, if I talk about this sort of like social projection of criminal figures and this whole stuff, obviously like racism is written all over it. But I'm telling you, like the war on drugs and the mass incarceration is maybe the most extreme example, but you see it in other more subtle incidences in all sorts of social spaces. And again, then eventually, like, also, it boils down to like very personal decisions, where you're sort of like, oh, do I want to do this? Because it's weird, to sort of if I think once or twice I lived in a building where we had like a doorman, and you normally have the doorman and you have a separate entrance for service people, and then like some black friend would visit me, and then like the doorman, who's also black, takes my friend to the service entry. And then I'm sort of like I'm completely embarrassed about this like weird treatment, and and then also like, how do I react? Like, should I like just make a stand? Oh no, it's with me, which is also not it's maybe not something desired to do. So you have these situations all the time, and like things which are like normal for me. Sort of, like I'm walking in the street and I don't know, I need to use the bathroom somewhere, then I just go to a restaurant and I just ask, may I use the bathroom? Yeah, fine, here, go. Black people would never do that.
Okay.
They
Wow.
wouldn't be allowed. And
Okay.
like if you're part of the privileged population, you don't really perceive that, because for you it's normal. If you think about, how certain things in Austria or in Germany, maybe also, probably there are also many things that we don't really perceive, which other people, they don't dare to do this, or they don't normalize, that they can just sort of, they can just sort of pull this, so yeah, it's a long history, and I think you're asking the right question. So if one actually wants to shift the dynamic and combat crime, one actually, I told you they had this police reform, the attempted police reform in Janeiro, so-called pacifying police units project. Yeah, it failed because they, instead of, providing, good jobs to people, like really giving them this economic basis, and like investing in education or in housing or in what's called sanitization. So, like having like proper water and this sort of stuff was also not really happening in the favelas. They only invest in police, in more police, which it didn't work. Now, in the beginning, you might even be able, to sort of expel some of these criminal groups, but yeah, then guess what? Then, they go somewhere else, and then it takes them some year to regroup or something, and then they come back. And actually, like, also what unfortunately happens, local population sometimes likes them better because, yeah, they are sort of from the neighborhood, and yeah, they're nicer to the local population than police. And so you have this very weird scenario. And I think, if you want to overcome it, then, like these measures, they don't work. You really need to give them better jobs, good education, good housing, like a good future. And then it's not something you can just do overnight or something. It will take time, but yeah, money is way better spent, I think, on these social policies than on more police.
I totally agree. Let me ask you a more personal question.
Yeah.
As far as I researched, you also wrote articles in, was it Portuguese, I believe, or Spanish? So how would you describe your research interest in Latin America? Did you live there? Do you have relatives there, or what is it that you focused on Latin America, and also especially on Brazil? And also the second part, how would you describe your research interest in this patriarchal structures that are,
Yeah,
of course, involved in not only drug trafficking, armed conflicts, but also in this penal state?
exactly. Okay. Well, actually, in Brazil, I have been a very long time, so more than 10 years. So, not sure exactly how that happened. But I don't know. I was when I was younger, I was you know, I come from very small place. So I was you know, as a kid, very interested in learning languages and geography or something like this, because I was mostly bored during the afternoons at home. So I just started to, I don't know, I just started to get curious, and actually I started learning Portuguese when I think I was like 13 or something, like with a dictionary. I actually tried this alone at home, and I had a pen pal at that time from Sao Paulo. So it was always very like exciting, like, oh, like, wrote me a letter, and now I have to understand the letter. So I actually started early learning Portuguese, which I think is weird, like weird, no, but a little bit different, because it's not like some obvious language choice, but I liked it a lot. Yeah, and then I sort of got here when I was young, like through university exchange at the time, and then I started working for different international organizations. Started yeah, getting really engaged, I would say, you know, with I don't know, with the city, with you know, these human rights violations, with the political situation, and also with my local community. So like in my neighborhood, I was also like really engaged in, like, you know, local politics. I mean, I never was a politician or something, but you know, like something needs to be done here. The transportation issue. This sort of stuff. So you know, I think where you really like start, like because I like the city a lot. I actually think it's a brilliant city, you know. And then when if you like something, you want to take care of it, you know, in some way. So I think that was my drive somehow, and also yeah, I think in Brazil I had also the opportunity, because of yeah, this very good, this very strong, you know, like academic and journalistic and human rights community, activist community, on documenting human rights violations, on researching this sort of stuff. You know, and I had a really like, I was giving lots of freedom, like in my during my master's studies here, during my PhD as well. You know, like that. And this is actually really cool. You know, to just be able to develop something, and yeah, and obviously also being able to yeah, I don't know, interact with the local research community. I would say that particularly like the anthropologists or the sociologists here in Brazil are very good. So there's so much to discover, and it's very rich what they're writing about. But obviously, when you still learn the language, and yeah, but I think in particular for this you know, weird political situation that we have, I think also there's so much contribution that can be made, like from the global south in general, but like, especially from places like here, you know, like in terms of like police violence, for instance. You know, Brazil has so much more experience doing this than I mean, like the Brazilian academic journalistic human rights community has more experience doing this than like Germany, right? Or I don't know, other topics. So, you know, like it's interesting to yeah, start to introduce also some sort of like shift in this flow of knowledge, you know, which which can be the other side around. Like, for instance, Brazil has also considerable experience with, documenting violence against women. In Germany, they don't even have like the legal definition of femicide in the penal code. So it's and you don't perceive these things if you're not like used to talking about this issue every day, right? And you said I'm like, yeah, because here for example, in the gender community, then people they talk a lot about like how to document these things, and it's like a big political issues, and people somehow have the numbers in their heads and something like this, and you go to Germany like, oh, wait a minute, wait a minute, we don't have this in the penal code, no, and so it's invisible, and then you start to perceive things also from a different perspective. Yeah.
And I have my last question for this lecture or interview would be, because I saw it in your paper for Open Democracy, it's from 2022. Brazil's policing is a war of man, is the
Yes.
title. Civilians are caught in the crossfire. It's available in English as well, so people can read it. There you use the term warrior's masculinity. Maybe we can talk about this term for a bit. Please explain to us what is this term and how do you use it?
Well, I would say that warrior masculinity, well, it's not something that I have coined. Actually, there's literature on this. But to make it very short, I would say there's this sort of understanding that an essential part of being a man is war. So you combat the enemy, you conquer territory, and you protect the women and children and the perceived weak. Or that one might also say, in order to become a man, one needs to engage in combat or something, which I think in many cultures is actually something, some understanding that's somehow normalized. If you talk about like military service or something like this, compulsory military service. What I have sustained in these papers is that what I have mentioned before, so that on the one hand, if one looks at the war on drugs here, on the one hand, you have, this the constructed threat. I mean, obviously, there's also like always like an essence of truth to it. So it's also never completely constructed, but it's completely exaggerated, obviously, and it turns into social stigma. It turns into completely horrible narrative, right? But the constructed threat of a heavily armed drug trafficker, which is associated with which people associate, or which the media associates with people who are poor, with men who are poor, who are Black, and who are from favela, right? And on the other hand, then police moves in, and police needs to protect people, and police needs to swing this, and then like it's a little bit of actually police, you don't call them officers here; they're called soldiers, and also drug traffic also calls their employees soldiers. So it's and then you have this weird situation. Actually, some factions, I call them agents nowadays. It's also not a very good term. But you have these very weird situations. And if you research in this whole mess the impacts of this public security on women, then it's a little bit getting possibly hit from both sides. You have high levels of violence in these communities, and when police gets in, it gets worse. And this is the war of men, and the security logic is often driven also by vengeance, which is very dangerous, because every time drug traffic, let's say, it takes out police, or like there is a police officer who died in service. There will be heavy retaliation, and this has led in many occasions to even massacres. Massacres is something here that we define as more than 3 people dead in an operation, but there have been massacres with nearly 30 people who died in one police operation because they wanted to, I don't know, capture some alleged drug traffickers, which they never found. So this is very heavy. So, and people, they also in the favelas, they get so scared if drug traffic manages to shoot police or to kill police, because no, they will be horrible on all of us, yeah, it's actually in my own research. I have documented that the hardest hit women by police operations are like somehow wives or ex-wives or girlfriends, sometimes even mothers of drug traffickers or alleged drug traffickers or ex-drug traffickers, or someone who's at some point in time, I don't know, has a police file because of whatever. But they are really, yeah, they really don't have an easy life, and they have in many occasions suffered all sorts of human rights violations because they can't get the guy, and then they go after the woman, or like they go after the woman to get the guy, and sexual violence and this sort of stuff, it happens in these occasions, at least what I have found in my own research.
Dear Kristina, I thank you very much for your time and for the shared knowledge. I highly recommend your papers and articles, and people also can follow you on Twitter. It's Kristina Hinz _. Yeah, thank you once again.
Yeah, I thank you. Yeah, I hope people in Austria and anywhere else, I was able to get them a little bit interested in these sorts of issues. And yeah, I wish you all the best, and I hope that also in the future we can sort of extend these conversations, and yeah, maybe also that yeah, I was able to provide some sort of like insights, and like as I said, some sort of knowledge transfer from the other side, something that might be interesting and useful also for research and academia in Austria.
Absolutely.